bleep starting the recording and transcription. Let me turn off that transcript. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to your August H.O.P.E Advisory Board meeting. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a visual. Paula, we have a couple of excused absences today. Jan is on a family vacation. Chanel is also, she's out of state. Hold on just a sec. There's someone else coming into the meeting. And Ricardo is at the inauguration of the Colonia Paz housing development for farm workers in Lebanon right now. So hats off to that. And then Carol Butcher also has an excused absence this evening. Her family is visiting. Okay, let me go ahead and start your meeting. This in slideshow mode. Give me just a sec. Boy, it won't let me turn that around, will it? Okay. Slideshow from current slide. Here we go. Okay, are you all seeing my slideshow all right? Can someone give me a verbal?
Looks fine to me.
Yeah. Thanks, Charles.
Yep.
So virtual meeting housekeeping, please mute until it's your turn to share. You can unmute or choose to be seen by clicking the mic and the camera button at the top of the screen. I know this is the first time we're using Microsoft Teams for a H.O.P.E meeting, so there's going to be a little learning curve. For the public comment, please type your name into the chat area and say you want to make a public comment and what the topic is. And then there will also be an opportunity pardon me just a second, letting some people into the meeting. There will also be an opportunity for public comment for folks on the phone. So here is
Julie,
your meeting.
If you don't mind me interrupting, I just wanted to let people, you were saying at the top of the screen, if you're joining via browser, all your controls are towards the bottom of the screen when you move the mouse.
Via browser, the controls are at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for that, Charles. Okay,
No
that
problem.
makes sense to me now. Okay. Let's go back to this. So for your meeting agenda, here it is. The community updates will include an update from our wonderful city staffer, Paul Bellata, who's here today. Thanks for being here, Paul. And then I'll give a brief update on the HB 4123 pilot. And then we've got a robust educational component tonight about the housing spectrum and housing first in our community with three wonderful guest speakers, Andrea Myrie, who you know on our board, Sean Collins, the Executive Director of Unity Shelter, and Allison Hobgood, the Executive Director of the Daytime Drop-In Center. And then thanks to a handful of your fellow board members, you're going to hear about some lived experiences with homelessness and housing insecurity. So thank you for all who are sharing tonight. Give me just a sec here. Letting folks in. Just a reminder of the agreements for the culture and conduct that you all decided on as board members, although I know we have some new board members now who were not there for that first meeting, and also many of you who've been here for more than 2 years. So inclusivity, curiosity, kindness, open-mindedness. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing to allow for public comment. Give me just 1 second, and I will check the chat. I have not seen anything put in the chat for public comment. Let me check and see if there's any folks on the phone. I do not see anyone who's called in via telephone. So last call for public comment. Going once, going twice. Okay, thanks, folks. Go ahead and screen share again. Okay, we're going to do a vote to approve your July minutes. Paula, I let you know who's not able to be here tonight for other reasons, but it's possible that some of them might have joined. Like Cindy, I see that you're here, even though I thought you wouldn't be. And I think someone has unmuted. If you can go ahead and mute yourself if you're not sharing. I'm getting a little feedback. Thanks, folks. Let's go ahead and have a motion from one of you to approve your minutes.
Motion to approve minutes.
Thank you, Brian Cotter. Is there a second?
I second.
Was that Andrea?
Second.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and take roll as we go through to approve these. If you were not at the last meeting, please abstain. Catherine Biscoe.
Approved in here.
Thank you. Carol Butcher. I do not believe that Carol is going to be able to be here, and she let me know ahead of time, so she has an excused absence. Same with Ricardo. Brian.
Here and approved.
Thank you. Cade.
Here, approved.
Anita.
Approved in here.
Joel.
Here and approved.
George.
Here and approved.
Ari.
Here and abstain.
Thank you. Barbara.
Here and approved.
Melissa.
Here and approved.
Bria.
Here and approved.
Cindy.
Here and approved.
Charles.
Here and approve.
Peggy.
Here and approve.
Andrea.
Here and approve.
Thanks. Jan is not able to be here tonight for an excused reason. Same with Chanel. Reese. I don't think I saw Reese here. Let's mark him absent. Nancy. Okay, thank you. I wanted to remind folks before we jump into the community updates about the communications update that Kaylee shared last time. I know some folks can join certain meetings and not others, and so I included links to the HOPE website and the new HOPE community updates page for folks who weren't able to see Kaylee's presentation last time, going over all of these new communications about the HOPE recommendations and press releases and a comprehensive 3-pager community progress update. Okay, so I will stop screen sharing. Make sure there's nobody who's waiting to be admitted. Okay, great. And we have a community updates portion, and I'm going to pass the reins over to our city councilor, Charles, and our city staffer, Paul Bellotta, to give an update about the city social services funding policy update. And Paul or Charles, I'm not sure which one of you wants to start, but I leave it in your hands.
I guess I'll start. Unless you want to, Charles, whichever way you want to go.
I would just, only thing I was going to provide is a quick overview of our last work session and the discussion we had there. And then if you have more information, Paul, you can take it away. Sure. If that works for you.
Sounds good.
All right. So on August 18th, City Council had a council work session, and one of the topics was on City Council social service policy. When that policy was originally drafted, it was supposed to be updated, I believe, annually, and it hasn't been updated in a very long time. So we're looking at that. And out of the conversation we had on how to go about updating it, what we came up with was creating a task force of 4 counselors, which we will officially create at the next city council meeting. And we're going to use the involve method. And I suggested to the rest of the council, and it seemed to be received, with a lot of positivity, to meet with HOPE to gather information, since that's what we've done a lot of. We have a lot of data already to share. And then the task force can draft that update and then present it back to HOPE for any final inputs or changes. And basically they're charged with preparing a draft update of the social service funding policy by the end of the council term. Paul, do you have more to add to that?
I think that Charles covered a lot of it. I can give you a little bit of the history on it. Why are we doing it now? This was, from the administrative side of things, there's kind of 2 answers. One's a policy, one's administrative side. The administrative side is very easy. We have a time on all of our council policies where they need to be periodically updated. And this one should have been updated before February 4th of 2016. Which is before I was here. So, but there is a reason that it has not been updated. At the time that it came around, that was when the city was doing the visioning process. And so the council decided that it really didn't make sense to update that while the vision was going on. So then the vision got completed, and the council and the county and providers went into the HOAC project. And so the idea was, well, it really doesn't make sense to update the social service policies until we figure out what HOAC's up to. And then, you know, HOAC ended and then HOPE came around. So it's been the same thing each time. There's been another big policy endeavor going in here. So now that HOPE's recommendations are out, they've been adopted and everything, this seemed like the right time to get around it. So on the administrative pieces of it, it's just a matter of getting things into the right format and seeing if all the words are the same words that people had done before. But on the policy side, I think that, you know, in the discussion at the work session and things, you know, the council has a lot of different ideas about ways they may want to go to better align with the HOPE recommendations. And I think the HOPE recommendations have been very, very impactful on some of the thinking that the council has on why they want to take this on now. A couple things that are challenging on this, and also not challenging. Everything's a two-sided deal with the social service policy. Normally in the world of policy making, there's a lot of restrictions on folks. There's either legal restrictions or, you know, what is best practice? What do other people do? In this instance, there's actually very little. And so that, on the one hand, is very flexible, but oftentimes having everything at your possibility also makes it a more difficult process. So the language that guides this is just the small one-sentence piece of the levy, because these are levy funds, which says that it has to be provided to social service agencies. No other further guidance on there. So that gives the council a wide range to look at. You know, when you look at other best practices and what other people do, having a levy for social service funding is very unique to Corvallis. So there really isn't another person to be looking out to on that. There's some that do smaller things with CDBG like we do, but nothing like this. So it's really going to be the council's purview to make this be how they want it to be. Some of the discussions that were going on at the work session, again, none of these, there's nothing that is looking like consensus. This task force is going to be the one that works this through. There's nothing that's going to be done without the community engagement piece on the front end of this. But, you know, some of the questions were like, should we be doing small grants and try to target those for smaller agencies? Or should we be trying to do bigger ones that are more impactful? And should we be trying to target certain aspects of social services or not? Should we be trying to do it should it be kind of a starter fund and then agencies kind of get weaned off of it, or is it something that should be very much more reliable every year? You can count on it. And so, you know, there's a lot of those kind of decisions that will be coming through this policy probably. So it will be up to the task force to figure out what their engagement will be. Like Charles said, I would expect that the HOPE board will be involved in there. I would expect they probably will also do some direct to provider because not everybody's on the HOPE board. So stay tuned on that. They haven't had their first meeting. They will be appointed on the first meeting in September. And the mayor has identified who those 4 that he was going to put up are. So it will be chaired by Councillor Paul Schaefer, and then Jan Napak, Hyatt Lytle, and Charlene Ellis will be the other members on it. So this is a new thing that we have this year called City Council Task Force. And the council will really be the one kind of running the show on this. We'll have some administrative stuff goes on in the background. And of course, if they want to ask us questions or get data and stuff, we will be there to support them. But this is really a council initiative and a council activity that will be going on. So that's all I've got. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Do we have questions from any of the board members about the social services policy process or what's happening with that? Okay. Well, Paul, thank you for being here tonight. Yep. I know you're a busy guy. And Charles, thanks also for the update on this.
Sure. And thank you, Paul. I like the history, and it's a very good explanation of why there's been such a delay in updating this policy.
Thanks, Charles.
Okay. Thank you, folks. I'm going to move on to the next community update and screen share for just a sec. Okay. The coordinated homeless response pilot. I've given you an update before, but like I said previously, there are folks who tune into some meetings and not others. So wanted to make sure that this is mentioned at this meeting. The city and the county are working together, and with CSC too, Peggy, let me not leave you out, to improve coordination and communication on homeless response with state funding over the next 2 years. And one of the requirements of this pilot that's outlined in the legislation is to put together a 5-year strategic plan in the next fiscal year. So that would be about a year from right now. And the strategic plan has to address ideas about sustainable funding for homeless response and services. And right now, we are working together to really get consensus about what the role of a coordinated office would be, its functions, how it works in collaboration with service providers. And there is a joint elected officials meeting on September 8th for an update on this topic. And I put a link there. I know links are sometimes hard when the PowerPoint is posted, but you can find this on the Board of Commissioners calendar, and there's a link to the work session. The timely deadline that's coming up this fall is a memorandum of understanding between the city and the county and CSC, and it's due to the legislature on October 1st. So we are working on getting that finalized. Okay, I will go ahead and stop sharing and see if there's any questions or any other community updates that we may have missed from our board members. Any questions about that pilot? Okay, well, let me check that our presenters are good to go. Allison, how are you doing?
Ready to rock.
Great. Sean, how about you?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, great. And I can see Andrea, I know you're here already. So I'm just going to screen share to introduce you so everybody can see your names and titles, although I think many are familiar with you three. The educational component today has to do with the shelter and housing spectrum in our community. What is Housing First? Where is it present in our community? And how basic needs navigation serves to connect folks to shelter or housing or a variety of other services. And so your guest speakers tonight are Sean Collins, the Executive Director of Unity Shelter, Andrea Myrie, the Executive Director of Corvallis Housing First, and Allison Hobgood, the Executive Director of the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center. So I will stop screen sharing so that our guests can share if they would like to. Take it away.
Okay, I think I'm going first, so. And then Julie, can you help me keep track of time so we don't go too over? We have a lot of stuff to cover, so.
Sure. Yeah, you are good for time. We had no public comment, so you've got some flexibility on time. We just want to save the last half hour for lived experience. So you are good on time.
Okay. Okay, so I am going to kind of gloss over a little bit about what Corvallis Housing First is. I think you guys have heard from me before, but in case you haven't, or in case you are not sure what we do. So Corvallis Housing First is an organization dedicated to providing housing to people that have experienced homelessness in our community. CHF actually started as the Corvallis Homeless Shelter Coalition. Barbara Ross was really instrumental, as well as Alita Haas-Holcomb, in getting our organization started. We used to run the men's shelter in town, and as well as doing a couple of other things, but have since evolved to providing housing and case management services and outreach. So this is just our mission statement, our vision statement. You know, we believe very strongly that housing is something that everybody needs to have a healthy life. So we own and operate 42 units of rental housing at 4 facilities, which are all supportive Housing First projects. So we provide case management to people living at those facilities and do our best to find sources of rent support for them. So either they're, you know, they have SSI and they're paying rent through their SSI, or they have a Section 8 voucher or another voucher or support through Benton County Mental Health, some other rent support. But our policy is that no one in our housing pays more than 30% of their income towards rent. So we actually spend about $30,000 to $40,000 to subsidize people's rent in our housing each year. When people move in, generally between about 70 and 80% of our residents remain in housing or move to other permanent housing, which is pretty cool because we are serving folks that definitely have a lot of barriers and housing challenges. We also, in addition to operating our housing and providing case management for people in our housing, we do case management in partnership with other organizations, primarily Unity Shelter at their the men's shelter, the women's shelter, the Safe Place program, but we also work the daytime drop-in center and do a bit of street outreach as well. So that's as much as I'm going to cover about us. We currently, see, I think we have grown in the last few years from having like 2 or 3 staff. Now we have 12. So we've gone through a great period of growth, like many human services organizations in the last few years, just because of the need and funding. And we probably will be adding more case managers to our staff soon. A little bit about Housing First. So what is Housing First? Many of you have probably heard of this concept and are familiar with it, but I thought I'd kind of go over the basics about Housing First. So the 7 standards of the Housing First approach are moving people into housing from the streets and shelters without precondition of treatment or compliance. So we don't require people to be already getting case management or receiving treatment or anything or like that. Has been the model in the past for getting people into housing, and that's not the case with Housing First. The point is to get people into housing so they can get access to services. We are obligated to bring a robust array of support services to people in our housing. So whether that's it's case management, but it's also coordinating other services. There's a variety of models of case management. We tend to be kind of a broker approach where our case manager is coordinating services for that individual based on what their own goals for themselves are and what their needs are. So it could be that, they need mental health treatment, or, they need counseling, they need medical assistance, they need to figure out their SSI, they want to reconnect with their family, they want to start doing more art. So it just really depends on whatever their goals are. They want to find employment. It really depends on whatever somebody feels that it's important for them to be stable. And these services are predicated on assertive engagement instead of coercion. So we don't require, we don't have anybody sign a contract saying that they will participate in case management, but we hopefully are what my sister likes to say, aggressively hopeful enough that that people work with our staff. Continued tenancy is not dependent on participation in services. The units are targeted to the most disabled and vulnerable homeless members of our community. Generally, we are working with people that have experienced chronic homelessness and have some sort of disability or debilitating condition. We're working with more vulnerable folks than people that might be experiencing one-time homelessness. We embrace a harm reduction approach to addictions rather than mandating abstinence. So while we are trying to support people in their recovery or reduction of substance use, we don't require sobriety or people being clean when they come to our housing. Residents must be on leases and have tenant protections under the law. So we work with a property management company, At Home Properties, to they are the folks that hold people's leases and also process rent, process also lease violations. So we have that sort of second party that's involved in housing. And the great thing about that is it provides people a positive rental history and a way to establish a positive relationship with a property management company. And Housing First can either be a project-based or a scattered site model. So why, some people think, well, this doesn't make sense. Like, how can you possibly, provide housing to people that are still using drugs and alcohol, that might be not receiving treatment for their schizoaffective disorder? Like, how can that possibly be? And it's a really hard thing. I'm not going to lie. It's a really difficult task, but but it's very possible, and it's actually been proven to be successful. So most studies have shown that, getting people into housing and then providing access to services has not only increased that person's stability and health, but has decreased costs to the community. And I'm not going to walk through all these statistics, but Julie, I'll give you a copy of these slides so people can read on their own what, the sort of the evidence behind Housing First and why it works. So some people confuse Housing First with permanent supportive housing. So Housing First is definitely an approach to providing permanent supportive housing. So permanent supportive housing is really an intervention that combines affordable housing assistance with support services for very vulnerable folks. So they're very similar, but supportive housing, like you can still have a Housing First project with a lower level of support. Permanent supportive housing is more clearly defined by HUD and is a more established model of providing housing for people that are very vulnerable and have experienced homelessness. So again, this approach has been shown to greatly reduce costs associated with people who frequently utilize a variety of services in our community. And the other thing I wanted to clear up too is that we actually have very limited true permanent supportive housing in the community. So because it requires ongoing rent support and funding for services. So at Corvallis Housing First, we do our best to fundraise to provide the case management support services that we do for people in our housing. And we also work with each individual to try to find rent support for them. However, it's not quite the same thing as a permanent supportive housing project where the funding for the vouchers or the rent support and the services are combined and are supporting that housing project. So we do the best job we can trying to piece together funding sources to provide those two things. But if I really got technical about it, we really have 5 units of PSH in our program that's supported through our COC grant, our HUD grant, in partnership with Community Services Consortium that provides both funding for services and for rent support. But again, we do the best job we can based on what's available. And that's it for my part. If I will stop screen sharing so Sean can talk about Unity Shelter, if I can figure that out. Okay.
Thank you, Andrea. Andrea, do you want to pause and take any questions about Corvallis Housing First before Sean shares about Unity?
I think we should just move on and we'll take all questions at the end.
Sounds good.
Just to make sure we have enough space for Allison.
Sure. Take it away, Sean.
Okay, is that coming up?
Yes, it looks good and we can hear you.
Okay, so a little bit of history about Unity Shelter. Unity Shelter really began as an effort to bring together under one kind of umbrella organization, the men's shelter, which had been operating under the fiscal sponsorship of the Unitarian Fellowship. The Room at the Inn Women's Shelter, which had been operating under the First United Methodist Church, and Safe Place, which was really started by First Congregational United Church of Christ out on West Hills. And when those organizations really came together to form Unity Shelter, that was we started that conversation really in 2019 and legally formed in January 2020. So that was all pre-pandemic. And the expectation at that time was that we would merge legally and over a long period of time seek to figure out a growth strategy and really focus on just trying to streamline the administration and make it a bit more efficient, make sure that policies and procedures were consistent and kind of keep the machine moving but grow slowly. And then the pandemic came and everything changed. So we grew a lot during the pandemic and moved from overnight shelter that was seasonal to year-round shelter, opened up the Hygiene Center, And then in May of 2021, partnered with with Corvallis Housing First to open up the 3rd Street Commons shelter. And so we've really grown from a fairly small seasonal operation to a year-round operation that operates in really 8 locations right now. If you think about all of the micro shelter locations that we've got. So it's a very different program than it started out as. And we've been really kind of working pretty diligently to integrate those programs and make sure that we can figure out how to absorb all that growth and be successful going forward. So it's been a pretty intense couple of years. The vision for Unity Shelter is really focused on shelter and housing, right? Trying to envision a community where being without shelter or housing is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring, and where all people have a safe and stable place to live, connect, and thrive. And our mission is a lot simpler than that. It's providing safe shelter through collaborative care. And we continue to kind of revisit that mission and think about whether or not it really reflects what we're doing now. And it largely does, but I think you have to put a lot of words around what safety means and what that collaboration looks like. There's a lot of partners that we work with in the community. Corvallis Housing First is a big one, but we work with Stone Soup, we work with Samaritan Hospital, we work with Benton County Health Department. The city and county generally are both funding and other partners. It's a lot of folks that really make this all run. Vina Moses, the drop-in center, and it's a pretty long list. When I really list out all the partners, it takes a couple of slides. And the safety that we provide is not just a safe roof, but hopefully a safe space, meaning we welcome diversity. We really think hard about equity and inclusion. We want to make sure that it is culturally safe, that it is emotionally safe for people, that when you come into our environments, you are welcome and you feel in a world that often does not provide a very welcoming door for a lot of folks that experience homelessness, and there's a lot of bias and challenge out on the street. We want you to feel like this is a space where you belong, however you present. So we offer low barrier shelter and transitional housing, and that brings with it tons of challenges, but it's very important to us that that door remains open, and that we recognize the need for belonging in everything that we do. So that's a big part of what we do, and kind of what I would call the growing edge for our organization overall is really trying to make sure that our staff, which is a more diverse staff than we've ever had, and our clients feel respected and safe, and like they are in a space where their individuality and personality can really show up and be respected and have some dignity. Let's see if I can get this to advance. Hello. There we go. So I like to talk a little bit about the building blocks on the path to housing in our community. And I think at the far right end of the spectrum right now is really where Corvallis Housing First is, right? You've got permanent supported housing or supported housing in some way with some rent supports and case management, long-term, stable rental and lease environments, case management, wraparound supports, et cetera. I think for Unity Shelter, we kind of focus on the 3 columns before that. So for the folks that are unsheltered, we really service those folks through the Hygiene Center and provide showers and laundry and device charging and food and access to case management staff that are provided by Corvallis Housing First. In the shelter environment or managed camping environment, you think more about the men's shelter and room at the inn, where you're inside, there's more behavioral expectations, you've got really consistent access to services, you're going to have access to case management on a more regular basis, and we really seek to provide more safety and stability in that environment. And then in the transitional housing space, which is really more kind of the managed camping transitional housing space, because Safe Camp really started as just literally a managed collection of tents, and has grown into micro shelters. That space, we really try to provide family-friendly options. We've got a lot of different options in that space right now. And at 3rd Street as well, we can't handle kids there, but we can handle couples. So there's plenty of gaps in the community in trying to serve, particularly in a low barrier environment, families and couples. And so we can do a lot of that But in that space, there's higher expectations in terms of behavior, in terms of your ability to be a part of a community, and work with that community to resolve conflicts, to try and cooperatively manage and kind of live together in a space and share resources. And there's a lot stronger expectation in terms of your engagement with case management and progress towards goals. And similar to what Andrea described in terms of those goals can be varied. Doesn't have to be, your first goal does not have to be housing, but we do expect that when you're in the transitional housing environment, ultimately that's your goal. You may have a lot of things that you need to work on, ID and other things to kind of maybe recover some health. We have plenty of people that come in who need time to get ready for surgery, to recover from surgeries, to kind of building up their resilience, if you will, to be able to start to think about, hey, housing really is an option for me, and how do I get there? Our programs currently have 88 shelter beds and 31 transitional housing micro shelters. The shelter beds are scheduled to increase as COVID conditions allow. That's going to start at Room at the Inn, and we're starting that process now by increasing the bunks there. Our goal is to get up to 35 beds. We're at 22 there right now. At the men's shelter, we're at 42 beds. We want to get back up to 50. We're really still trying to manage with a kind of balance between density and trying to maintain some COVID safety. But our shelters are low barrier. Our transitional housing is low barrier as well. And then the Hygiene Center has operated since 2020. So probably said enough about that. A little bit of more detail. So in terms of Congregate Shelter, it breaks out as 42 beds, like I said, at the men's shelter. We've served 266 people since January 2021, and that's a little over 12,500 bed nights. So we count a bed night as one person in one bed for one night. At Room at the Inn, 22 beds, 149 people, almost the same number of bed nights, only 1,000 different there, or 900 different at 11,006. At non-congregate shelter, that's really 3rd Street Commons. That experience is definitely different. You're not sharing, you're not in a bed in a big room full of other people. You've got private rooms with your own bathroom and shower. And
There is somebody who is unmuted. If you could please mute yourself, that would be great. Sorry, Sean, I'm not telling you to get out. You're doing great.
My apologies.
No problem.
Who's my dog?
So we've got 24 rooms there at 3rd Street that includes 3 respite rooms, and we've served 78 since May of 2021 when we opened. 27 of those were COVID isolation cases, and a lot of bed nights there too. 7 people have moved into housing. Safe Place has had 48 people. I went back, I was kind of amazed that since Safe Camp began in 2019, out of the 86 people that we've served, 48 have moved into housing or other transitional housing or treatment programs. So great success in that space. So Hygiene Center, the numbers are just kind of crazy in terms of the number of meals and showers that we provide there. It's a lot of people that we see. And in a typical month, we will see about 230 unique individuals at the Hygiene Center. And the majority of those people are camping in cars or in tents in our community. So just in terms of kind of where we're headed right now, we have started through the partnership with Community Services Consortium. We've gotten a little bit of money to have some emergency hotel shelter spaces. So we very quickly, as soon as we got that money, we started to get referrals and have filled up 5 rooms very quickly. Tara Gray is the point of contact for that. So if you think that there's somebody that would be a good referral for that, then reach out to Tara. We do have a referral form. We're really trying to focus on seniors and families that are in need of shelter. Oftentimes COI is full and there's just a wait time that we need to house people so that they can transition into a more appropriate family shelter. Sometimes that we've already had a very vulnerable senior come in that we just needed to land in a hotel for a couple of days so that we could wait until there was an opening at Room at the Inn and get them in there. And so we're really seeing this as a bridge where we can provide some support and get people into more appropriate options. We also got some funding from Oregon Community Foundation and some other funders, including Benton County, to create a life skills and transition coach. And that's really focused on trying to help people move from shelter or transitional housing into permanent housing. The focus there is going to be on things like cooking and cleaning and budgeting and, you know, like what's your life going to be like when you get your apartment? And are you prepared to manage in that space? Can you think that through? What help can we provide to you in that space? And we'll do that both in the transitional housing setting, but we'll also do visits to people when they get into housing to keep up with them and kind of supplement the aftercare casework that the Corvallis Housing First already does when people move into housing. So we don't have a position up yet, but we will soon. So look for that coming to you. Can give that back to Andrea.
Congrats on those new developments, John. To stop screen sharing, you have to, there you go. You already figured it out. Oh, Andrea, you are muted right now.
Thanks, Julie. Are we doing okay on time?
Yes, you are fine for time.
Okay. So we have had the opportunity with Unity Shelter to collaborate at our 3rd Street Common site. So you know, many of you know about us purchasing a hotel off of 99W in Southtown through Project Turnkey. This was last year in the spring. For the purpose of operating non-congregate shelter and then turning that facility into permanent supportive housing for people in the community. We had a plan to temporarily operate a shelter. We asked Unity Shelter, hey, can you guys help provide the shelter operations, because that's not something that CHF does anymore. They said, sure. They got, you know, we opened up the program, and then we had the opportunity to apply for a bunch more funding to build something that's more appropriate and more significant in terms of numbers of units for people in the community. And so the collaboration has gone on longer than what we were originally anticipating. But I think it's been a good collaboration and a successful model of partnership in the community for the benefit of people that are experiencing homelessness. This advance. So I'm not going to go over this too much. I think you guys have already heard about this a bit, but Project Turnkey is a program through the state of Oregon. They passed money to Oregon Community Foundation to help organizations buy hotels and motels across the state for a variety of reasons, for shelter and for housing. The 3rd Street Common site has 24 rooms, each with their own bathroom, community kitchen, laundry facilities. And we've been able to raise money through a variety of sources, thanks to Community Services Consortium, the city, the county, for helping us keep operations going here at this site. So who is living here right now? So adults experiencing homelessness, likely chronically homeless, disabled, vulnerable, overrepresented. So we really tried hard to focus on looking at who is on basically on the wait list for and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically on the wait list for you know, a micro shelter or people that had been experiencing chronic homelessness and that were on the street, who are also LGBTQ or BIPOC. So primarily, you know, we have a ton of people that have Native American heritage that are experience homelessness in our community, an overrepresentation of Black and Latino folks experiencing homelessness. So we really wanted to try to focus on serving more people of color at this site. And we've been largely successful. So we've been at least matching what the percentage of the homeless population is for each of those groups at this site. We have a joint wait list for the program with Unity Shelter, and we also refer to the coordinated entry system for people for building the wait list for this program. Everyone that's here is in coordinated entry. Our case managers are regularly in coordinated entry, you know, entering information in about people, and we do refer to that list when we're placing people. And as Sean suggested, we provided some COVID quarantining rooms and isolation space for people. And then right now, Unity Shelter has 3 respite rooms in partnership with Samaritan here on site. So the operation model, so people are often confused, like, what's the role of CHP and what's the role of Unity Shelter? Really, Unity Shelter is responsible for the day-to-day operations here on site. So they are providing the 24/7 staffing support and supervision. CHF provides case management services as well as facility support. So we have a property management company that helps provide maintenance services and pays our utility bills and things like that. And so our staff, if you looked at the building, the front of the building is really Unity Shelter staff working in the office, making sure that people are staying safe, that folks are following rules, but also interacting with residents and just, doing day-to-day management of the site. Whereas our staff, our case management staff, is really focused on the individuals living at the site and trying to work with them on reducing barriers to housing, whatever else that they need. And we've served a much more vulnerable population, I think, here at this site than at our other housing sites. So clients can stay in their rooms without having to leave for a period of time each day. That's unlike some of the shelter models in the past. So really, they're welcome to stay here until they find permanent housing, as long as they're complying with the rules of the site, the behavior expectations. There's a lot of similarities between this program and Safe Camp, with the exception of, which we're still debating about, but requiring people to participate in case management, because there's like a, kind of a coming together of Unity Shelter approaches to transitional housing, but also us being a housing first organization. The expectation is really people are engaging in case management. We don't currently require that of people here, but we're still trying to work that out. And then we anticipate that this partnership for operations would end once we're ready to build at the site, which we think will happen in 2024. So we've already hired an architect. We're about to hire a builder. So we're really progressing in our timeline for developing more housing at this site, which we think will be, anywhere from 30 to 40 units of supportive housing. So at that time, then we'll stop the temporary housing / non-congregate shelter program with Unity Shelter. We've had a pretty amazing results from this. So we have served a ton of people just since opening last spring. We've provided a lot of quarantining space for folks. We've been able to move 7 people into permanent housing so far, which I think is pretty amazing, considering it takes people, in our experience, a good year or 2 to recover from the experience of being homeless. And we've only asked 3 out of that 78. We've only had to ask 3 people to leave, which is pretty amazing. So as I suggested, the next phase of the project really is to build more permanent housing at this site. So we have $8 million so far through a variety of funding sources, and are currently wrapping up our participation in the Oregon Supportive Housing Institute, which is really the gateway to more funding through the state for supportive services and or for developing the housing at the site. So this is interesting. So the supportive housing programs, grant program through the state of Oregon, comes with services funding and ongoing rent support for the site, as well as capital funding. And that's all I've got.
Andrea, I did not know that being part of the CSH cohort meant that kind of commitment for the PSH afterward. Wow.
Well, it's not for sure. We still have to apply, but it certainly helps. It's really the requirement that the state has of any applicant to go through the institute and be approved and go through the institute. So yeah, we're really excited about the possibility of getting that support through the state.
Congrats. Can I ask, would you like to take questions about these housing and sheltering services before we transition over to Allison, who's going to talk about the drop-in center's role and get some feedback from the board about the CDDC's future plans? Allison, do you have thoughts on this? Do you want to dive right into yours, or should we do some questions about housing and sheltering?
I'm fine to dive right in if Sean and Andrea feel good about that, and then we can do kind of a broader Q&A. But if
Yeah.
people feel like there's things specific to this moment, I'm down with that too. So whatever works.
Okay, are there specific questions about Unity Shelter and Corvallis Housing First or 3rd Street Commons? We can do those questions now. And Sean and Andrea, just so you know, I'm guessing you were focusing on other things, but there was lots of hand clapping and hearts and thumbs up while you were presenting. Peggy's saying she doesn't have questions, but great presentation. So thank you both for being here tonight. And George does have a question. Go for it, George.
Yeah, Andrea, I was just wondering, you talked about the development opportunity that you have on 3rd Street and progressing with that. Are there other opportunities that you're looking at along that? And I'm just kind of wondering what's in the development pipeline, or what's in the development future for Corvallis Housing First? What are you thinking about longer term?
Well, we have applied for Project Turnkey 2.0, so that would enable us to purchase another hotel property in Corvallis. We are interested in a spot, but we aren't making that public because we haven't, established any. We don't know if we're going into phase 2, and also we don't, we haven't established that relationship with the owners yet. But we should find out. They extended that a little bit, Julie, just so you know. It was supposed to be the end of August that we found out whether we made it to phase 2, but now it's September 15th. But if we make it to phase 2, then we get help from Oregon Community Foundation to purchase real estate and put together an operations plan. So that's kind of exciting. I'm pretty sure we're going to make it to phase 2. So cross your fingers.
That was a real collaborative effort with like 10 community partners and Andrea's organization stepping up to the plate to be the owner. George, did you have other questions about that, or was that it?
No, that was it.
Okay. Any other questions from our board about Unity Shelter and Corvallis Housing First, the work that their organizations are doing?
I just wanted to add.
Sorry, go ahead, Andrea, and then you have a question.
I just wanted to add one quick thing, which is I can't emphasize enough how important collaboration is and partnership in what we're doing with folks, because we've been able to make progress with so many more people working together and providing services to get people into housing. And I would say the same thing with the drop-in center, of just being able to closely collaborate, have tough conversations about the services that we're offering and changing things to be more effective. And, it's an ongoing conversation, but I would say we have just been able to move so many more people into housing and stability because of these partnerships. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Andrea. Cade and then George have questions.
I was just wondering, if in the past, I don't know, 1 to 3 years, if you've seen any major changes in terms of the need or more people needing services, or has it been, pretty constant in terms of the numbers?
So I'll jump in there a little bit. I haven't put the dipstick in the last 30 days, but a month ago when I looked, we were 20% up year on year in terms of the number of people that we're serving. And definitely, some of that is probably growth in the population. Some of it is probably more effective work from the SORT team and others to connect people with services. I think there's more visibility to the shelter and other services in town through the drop-in center and the hygiene center. So I think some of that increase in number is that, but I think my sense is yes. I mean, when I look at 230 people a month that are unique individuals we're serving at the hygiene center, that's a lot of people, and a lot of those folks are not going to the drop-in center. So, I think numbers are high too. So.
Thanks, Sean. Allison, do you want to chime in on that one as far as increase in numbers? I know you haven't shared what you do yet, but if you have insight on Cade's question.
Sure, thanks. This is Allison speaking. And this, I know this might be a little backwards because maybe folks don't even know what we do, but I do have a little bit of insight. And I would just agree with Sean. I mean, Sean and I haven't done a, comparison of lists of individual guests, who are you seeing and who are you seeing? But I've noticed just sort of what I'm imagining is kind of pandemic fallout trends in part in the last couple of years. And there are folks who, like at the drop-in center, we're seeing families come in who were usually able to pretty quickly springboard to other orgs or other partners who makes more sense for them because they're a family unit. But that's definitely happening in our community, and definitely I know in Lane County and other like close adjacent counties, folks are seeing a lot more people who were either living with aging parents, but they were disabled folks who needed a lot of support from their families, and then their parents passed away, and so they then were forced to leave the housing that they had. So a lot of need for, and Sean can speak to this, and has before, but seniors or elders with disabilities who were really precariously housed or living in other kinds of foster or group homes, and those social service nets have fallen out a little bit, and so they're ending up in their car or they're ending up just on the street. And so I think those are kind of the two populations that we're seeing a lot more of, more visibly. And I would need to do a little bit more data collection around sort of street outreach and, who kind of how our numbers are up there. But that's hard to say too, because we've just started data collection around that in the last year or so. So it's a little bit hard to know, but great question, Cade. Thank you.
Thanks,
thank you.
Allison. Did you have anything else to ask, Cade? Okay, thank you. George, you had a question.
Yeah, I actually had a comment that I wanted to make. I'm really grateful for the presentation, for the work that these folks do. And I think it's important for the Hope Board to really understand. These are the folks that are really at the street level with the boots on the ground, getting the work done. And it's kind of the first level of support that we're beginning to operate. And what we've been doing and what we're tasked to do as a group is to reconnect that social safety net that was dismantled. And, you're seeing we're making a start at the street level and working our way up from there. Next steps that I see is, and I'm hearing these folks talk about a little bit, is we need to start thinking about families, and then about what we can do about more permanent housing, more permanent affordable housing. That's because we can put lots of safety net stuff down here and get people into housing, but Andrea and Sean would be able to move people into housing a lot quicker if there were more units actually available in the marketplace. And so getting those units built and getting working family units built in town is something that we need to keep our focus on as well, and not forget that those are the next steps for us. But thank you for the work that you do, and it's really important. And it's nice that we're all tied together with it.
Thanks, George.
Yeah, thanks, George. And I don't see Ben Danley on the call, but I think he would probably say demand for their shelter is high as well, because some of that emergency hotel sheltering that we're doing is people that can't yet get into COI, right? So there's definitely some demand out there.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us, Sean. At the last provider monthly meeting, Ben shared that their wait list is the longest it's ever been since he's been with COI. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions about Corvallis Housing First or Unity Shelter before we transition over to the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center? Okay, Allison, you have about the next 20-25 minutes. I know you don't want to talk for that long and want to save some time for questions and feedback, but I will go ahead and start screen sharing and bring up your slides. Give me just 1 second.
Sure, take your time, Julie. Thank you. And yeah, my presentation is not that long, in part because I want to respect people's ability to focus, and also I was so happy to hear that the remainder of the meeting will be devoted to people talking about their lived experience and wisdom, and so I want to make sure we've got a lot of time for that too. So I will reintroduce myself. Hi, my name is Allison Hobgood, and I'm the ED at the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center. We're also known as CDDC. I use she and her pronouns, and just a quick visual description for people who that helps with access. I'm a white woman in my mid-40s. I sport a kind of mohawk hair vibe. I've got blue earrings and a blue t-shirt on, and I am in a glamorous upstairs area at the drop-in center with a fan on me blowing wonderful air, and the wall is white behind me. So thanks for the opportunity to be here with you all, and thanks to Julie for opening up the space to do that. And I'm excited to add some further context to the wonderful overview that Sean and Andrea offered. Thanks too for Julie. You're my Vanna White officially on slides. So I'm on a small computer and I don't have multiple monitors. And so I was like, can you just do this for me? So thank you for that.
I absolutely can. I just went to your second one.
I'll give you a high sign, but this is totally great. Let's just a light there, and I'll
Perfect.
just going forward, I'll just say, hey, can you switch it? And I'm really honored to be here representing an incredible organization like the Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center, and in collaboration with so many friends who are on this call, and especially Sean and Andrea, since they were co-presenters today. So per the slide that's up now, as a brief contextual reminder, our motto at the Drop-In Center is where needs are met. And we've got 3 primary mission-driven goals that enable us to help between 40 and 70 in unduplicated, very diverse people every day. And that's Monday through Fridays, 9 to 2. Like Sean, we're seeing about 250 unduplicated people a month and upwards of 750 people a year. And we are a community center and safe gathering space where people who are in poverty and are actively marginalized and stigmatized can receive social support and really be recognized in their full humanity, and we feel like we hope loved in their full selves. So we strive to offer every single person who uses the Drop-In Center services, regardless of their mental health disabilities or their substance use, the kind of human dignity that each of us really deserves. So that's sort of number 1. Number 2, we support people's most basic welfare by providing things like food, clothing, hygiene supplies, shoes, weather-specific supports around warming, cooling, and staying dry. These are just a couple examples of kind of basic welfare supports. We're a PO box for over 600 people who use the Drop-In Center as their address. And at any point, if you want to know more, feel free to contact me at the end of the presentation. My info will be there and I'm happy to chat. I just wanted to give an overview and then be able to talk with you if you have questions. Next slide, please, Julie. So as that third bullet was on the last slide, we are a healing-centered, low-barrier resource and navigation hub. And that means that we meet other needs of individuals across a really wide spectrum of day services. So we help with things like lost document replacement, access to employment, accessing phones and technologies, pet advocacy, assistance with prescription copays. We have mental health counseling for people, physical health supports like wound care, HIV testing and OHP enrollment, access to transportation, and referrals to other social service organizations. And none of those things, of course, are possible without a wide array of community partners who both come to the Drop-In Center and who we're able to direct connect people to as well. I also wanted to shout out, this was brought up a minute ago, our street outreach and response team, also called SORT. And those folks are really trying to connect with people who are living in encampments, who are less able to access the Drop-In Center for a number of reasons, and to let them know that we're here and that we can help. And if they're unable to be at the center, do some of that navigation and direct referral actually out in the field as they're helping people. I'm not sure that's totally exhaustive. When I walk into work and things are happening, I'm like, wow, there's a lot going on. But that gives you a general gist of kind of what's happening at the center. Next slide, please, Julie. So a low barrier first step resource access model is the way that we fit into the housing support structure that Sean and Andrea just outlined. And if you think back for a second to the slide that Sean had that was outlining building blocks, I like to think of the Drop-In Center as kind of the front door to that building block spectrum. And working coincidentally with folks really, especially in kind of those first two categories, which are people who are camping or are sheltered slightly more precariously, even if they're plugged into some kind of PSH. And so those are typically the folks that we see as guests and that we're working with on a day-to-day basis. And the kind of thing that we do to support folks in this journey toward housing looks like the things that are listed on this slide. So most basically, like first and next step conversations about housing, shelter, and living indoors. Like, have you thought about this? Are you interested? What might this mean for you? Following, thanks Andrea for outlining the 7 standards of a housing first approach, which are really near and dear to us too. This is really trauma informed, really harm reduction focused, and no one's trying to pressure anybody to do anything that they don't want to do. But sometimes folks are not sure what's even available to them or haven't had the safety and security or trust with someone to even have a conversation about what it might mean to be able to get into housing. So that's a really important part of what we do. We also do coordinated entry. We do vulnerability indexing for people who are ready, and we get them into the coordinated entry system. Our needs navigators help with that. We offer connections to Section 8 housing, alliances with HUD and the Lynn Benton Housing Authority. Referrals, immediate referrals for emergency housing vouchers. So emergency housing vouchers come out and we're able to either through other orgs like Unity and CHF, find the people who get those and tell them you have an emergency housing voucher, and then get them into some place that is facilitated by our community partners, or just broach that as a possibility with folks. A lot of direct connect, which we really try and do all the time. Like, we are a physical person acting as an advocate, standing next to you, sitting with you. So we'll direct connect people with, in this case, per the presentation, Unity Shelter and CHF caseworkers, and also link them into that kind of case conferencing. So someone at Unity might call and say, hey, we have a candidate who's coming up for a micro shelter. What do you all know about this person and their needs? Which of these spots, a micro shelter here or over here, or communal living at someplace like 3rd Street Commons, what do you think works best for them? Can you chat with them? Can you even sit down in a meeting with us and that person and figure out what's the best fit? So we're happy to do a lot of that, that important case conferencing too. And that happens in more formal and less formal ways. And then lastly, helping people in searches for available housing and rental spaces. So sometimes they're like, I've got a voucher, it's about to expire. What do we do? And we either pull in other experts, or some of our needs navigators who can do some of this will sit with folks too. Slide next, please, Julie. And one of the things I just wanted to mention, and if you're interested in this piece of the conversation, please feel free to contact me and we can chat. I don't want to take a bunch of time, but I did want to mention that we have been thinking about some expansion possibilities to maximize our intervention impact and move more people toward housing stability ultimately. And the goal in creating what's called a navigation center, the goals there, as I hope I'll make clear in a second, they really address, for this audience, HOPE board recommendations 1, 3, 6, and 7. So navigation centers are being popped up all around. Pop up sounds like it's really easy. It's not, but all around the state. We're kind of interested in what this might look like in Benton and for the Tri-County region. And what a navigation center allows in terms of HOPE recommendations are an emphasis on more better data coordination, better care coordination, augmented sheltering, and a one-stop shop resource center. And so just really briefly, like I said, if you could kind of envision the thing I just described, that is the drop-in center, but amplified a lot, sort of on steroids and in a material space that gives us a little more breathing room and maybe has like HVAC. And a space, that works better for both our guests and volunteers and all the staff that help to support our endeavors. So what we would try and do is retain a drop-in center, but really amplify the ability to catch and stabilize people more fully and with a more robust safety net. And so, for example, one component of navigation centers are low barrier, non-congregate respite and sheltering for vulnerable unhoused adults. And that's just like a breather, safety off the street. And then you can start to work toward those deep connections around housing and basic needs services. I've talked a lot, with Sean about this and what a role Unity would be, since they specialize in sheltering, how that collaboration would play out. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about in terms of a navigation center is, what does respite mean really in its most broadest sense? Like, how do we offer people a life breather and just enough time to get stable enough that they can even start to think about future orientations that involve housing and longer term, housing stability. And so that's kind of what's been on our minds around that piece of stability, regaining, and then the way that could help people to access permanent supportive housing, et cetera. A cool thing about navigation centers too is that they are a one-stop shop. They are a place where co-located agencies and providers can hang out together, do basic needs navigation, help with case management, jobs and employment, resource stuff, connections to affordable housing. And again, we're doing it at the drop-in, but it's a little more ad hoc, and it would be cool to kind of formalize this and really amp up that one-stop shop, because then it's a lot less stressful for people who are trying to piece together in their social support, a lot of really feels like kind of disparate organizations or agencies that are trying to help them. And then I'm going to wrap here in a second, but I wanted to give kind of a tangible example of what I mean and what we see at the drop-in center. So, and I apologize to those of you on the call who have heard me sort of offer this example, but we will have folks who have been often incarcerated for a period of time, who get stable in a way, will then move, let's say, to the state hospital or another facility where they are getting their mental health needs met. And then their place of connection and their community and their family is the drop-in center. So they will literally get dropped off from those institutional spaces at the drop-in center. And so what we thought a lot about is, like, what if you could get someone to be able to just rest for a while and help them to be able to administer their meds and give them, wraparound behavioral health supports, addiction supports that they need, and kind of do it in this place that's like a nest egg, that they already trust. And so too often we see folks coming in with that kind of precarity, they're doing awesome, and then they end up going directly back to camping, or they're in a congregate setting, which is what we've got, and that's wonderful, but it doesn't fit because there are folks there who bring them back potentially into worlds that were not, the most productive for them maybe. And so I don't know, thinking through this, I'm really excited to talk more with our guests. I'd love to hear from folks here, maybe not necessarily in this venue because of time constraints, but about how we can do this in the most healing centered way possible, and really out of a nothing about us, without us sort of guest first lens, where people who know what they need can help us to build a vision around something like a navigation center. So last slide, please, Julie. Is there a last slide? It was just my contact info.
Yes, it should be up for folks.
Oh, maybe I'm just glitching on my end. I can only
It's
see
not
the
up
other
for
side.
you? Oh, hold on a second. Well, let me, can you see it now?
No, I don't know if any of the other people can see it, but you can contact me. It's cool. I can just tell you myself.
Hold on just a second and let me remedy that, Allison. I am sorry.
It's no problem. I think a lot of people know how to find me anyway, but there we go.
Wanting to make sure it's up there.
Yeah, so this is just, I also was thinking about who might be on this call. This is my direct connect information. Also, if you're someone on this meeting who needs direct support from the drop-in center, this is our number, 458-233-5327. And then we have a website that people can go to as well. So just wanted to be considerate of meeting audience also and what people's needs might be. So
Thanks
that's it.
for that, Allison.
Thanks.
Can I ask, did everybody get a chance to look at this slide about the concept of a navigation center? Want to make sure folks were able to see that. I will go ahead and stop presenting. Okay, thank you. So I can see people nodding. Well, Allison, thank you so much. I think it's really important for everybody to understand the role that the drop-in center plays with sort of meeting people where they are and their basic needs, and also connecting folks to the kind of emergency and transitional and permanent shelter and housing living situations, and the work you do in collaboration with Unity and Corvallis Housing First to make that connection. So you are part of the housing and services spectrum in the connections that you make to places to live. Questions for Allison about what the Daytime Drop-In Center does, or any questions you have about the concept of a navigation center, which is really a one-stop shop resource center with sheltering, living, respite kind of spaces on site for people to stay.
This is Allison speaking. Also, this has been a lot of information. So if you just need to take some time to process and then want to circle back around, that is totally cool too. I know what it feels like to be on the spot, so no worries.
There are some great examples of navigation centers that have been funded by the state, down in Lane County, up in the Dalles, in Salem. They are a concept that the legislature in Oregon really wants to fund, to have one-stop shop resource centers with places to stay on site, and drop-in components. Melissa, go for it.
Yeah, thank you all, and thank you, Allison. I know we've had conversations with you on the IHN side, and we truly support navigation, and we just wish we could fund respite care in a more consistent manner, and that is still something we're poking around with. What OHA funds for Medicaid services in the medical category does not include respite of this kind, but they have this pocket category of funding where it's called in lieu of services. So services in a non-traditional medical setting. And we had been pushing hard to get respite included, and they put it on the docket and then they took it off. So I'm trying to figure out what happened with that. And Anita Earl, we've talked with her about that as well through the Care Hub, but really there are folks that come out of the hospital after a severe condition and they're not, or an invasive surgery, and they're not really set to be out on the streets. They need some place to do that last bit of recovery at the very, very least. And so to the extent that we can support that, we will try, but respite is one of those areas that we're really focused on because that's the medical connection. Despite, we also support housing in various capacities, but that is more of a priority, is that respite component for sure.
Melissa, thank you. This is Allison speaking. Just if I can have 2 seconds on this. One of my maybe not so secret missions, I think, is also to help get people thinking about concepts like harm reduction and respite, for example, in non-traditional ways. Like clinical harm reduction is really important and needle exchange is really important, but so is like a dignified conversation over a cup of coffee. And to my mind, that is harm reduction too. And I noticed when we were trying to apply for Measure 110 funds, that challenge of how to situate this kind of looser, more fungible version of harm reduction, even if you're saying, hey, we have, we're an offsite clinical space where we're doing HIV testing, like that's important, but all the rest of it, right? And so I've just been mulling a lot about the concept of respite in this in lieu of kind of way that you're talking about. And so I'm happy to brainstorm some more and see if we can think out of the box, but still then have people who have in the box money work for us.
Yeah, we'll definitely be thinking about it. And I think, the OHA prescribes funding in very specific ways inside of a box. And if you just deviate from the parameters of that box, then no, you're not accepted. And I think they are trying to look more creatively and get more to those supports and out of that medical realm and more into population health. So I feel it's coming, it's just not coming soon enough. And so if we all keep trying to push hard, we'll get somewhere.
We need to let them know we have to build a different box. Let's build a different box.
Trying.
I'm seeing some
there
stuff
you go,
in.
Anita.
Seeing some stuff in the chat. I want to make sure folks see. Yeah, knock, ring the door, ring the bell. And I also saw Sean, you put your hand up to ask a question, and then Barbara.
Yeah, it's really more of a comment than a question. A big shout out to the Drop-In Center. And for a long time, the Drop-In Center has been kind of a model place for me to learn about how to interact with people who are in crisis, who are not often seen and well respected in the community, and to create a safe space. And I just really big kudos to Alita and Allison for the space that they've created there and the history that's presented in this town. It's been really terrific. And I think that when we think at Unity Shelter about the way that we want to create safe spaces for people, part of that's trying to learn from the Drop-In Center. And I think it's nice that we have so many organizations that are trying to learn from one another in our community. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Sean. That means a ton. It's a pleasure and honor to be in partnership with you all. Yeah.
Alita, I'm
Alita's
glad you're
too.
here
Alita's here
tonight.
too.
I know.
If Alita wasn't here, we wouldn't even be.
Yes, well said, Sean, and thank you. Barbara, I think we have time for one or two more questions, so go for it, Barbara.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and thanks, Andrea and Sean and Allison, for this information. This is very powerful stuff. This question is mainly for Allison, and Julie, feel free to jump in as well. But since this is recorded and the community hopefully is going to view this, I was hoping that you could really make the distinction between what a navigation center and a respite center might look like, as opposed to the crisis center that has already been funded and under development, so that the community can understand the difference between those two facilities. And thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. This is Allison speaking. That's an excellent question, and I've been talking with folks about that too. And to my mind, and per sort of data on how this works, they're parallel important projects, but they're two completely different animals. And the crisis center is much more explicitly focused on mental health needs and acute crisis. And you know, a chair there is a kind of respite for sure, but I think the more clinical focus and its burgeoning out of a larger justice system improvement model makes it a very specific thing. We, of course, will continue to work really closely with the Corvallis Police Department, people, you know, who are working through the county doing mental health supports, and a lot of that happens at the Drop-In Center too. But I think the target for a crisis center is much more focused in a way. And the Drop-In Center is a broader kind of net to catch folks in. And so it means there may be folks who need shelter and support via a navigation center who have mental health disabilities, but they also might not, right? So the kinds of folks, there might be a bit of a more sort of diverse crew that's coming through at a navigation center as well. I think also one major difference is there's a drop-in component in the sense of, like, you can just come here, you don't really know what your need is, you don't have a particular need, you're here to just be in community and together with someone. In a crisis center, because it's working to address really important emergent mental health needs, that's really different too. So I guess I can leave it at that, but wonderful question. I hope that was clarifying.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. Let's see, Andrea, I think the crisis center will serve all in the community, not just those who are houseless, right? So you could have, you know, you live with your mom and she is in mental health crisis, or medications need to be adjusted, and it's a really volatile situation, but it's because of a mental health crisis, not because of houselessness. And right now, one of the main places people go is to the acute care unit in the ER, and they don't need that. They don't need the medical support. They need a place where they can have their mental health crisis needs addressed. So that's really, it's a smaller targeted population. And like Allison said, folks come to the drop-in center for a cup of coffee or for food or to get their mail. So they really do serve different functions. Cade, you work for Benton County Health Department, behavioral health. Did I miss anything?
That was good. I'll go into a little bit more about kind of my perspective working with the county and housing when I share in a little bit.
Okay, well, we are at time for our guest speakers today. Allison, do you want to go ahead and say that one last thing for folks who are calling in and can't see the chat?
I just wanted to say that yes, all that is true, but anyone, literally anyone, is welcome at the drop-in center. That's what's cool about it. And people will feel, that that's more and less of a place for them. That said, we do, hence why I'm here, we do predominantly serve folks who are experiencing pretty deep and chronic poverty. So, all right, enough from me.
No, you're great. I'm so glad you were here. And I think as the navigation center concept gets more fleshed out, or there's more, tangible ideas or concepts, circling back with the Hope Board to get feedback on this implementation of their 4 Hope recommendations is the role that they play in this community too. So you're getting lots of thanks in the chat. Sean, Andrea, Allison, thank you for being here, for answering questions, for helping to educate all of us in the community about what you do. It was wonderful to hear about it. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone. We are going to spend the last portion of the meeting hearing from 3 or 4 board members about their experience with housing insecurity or homelessness. And so we have, let's see, 30 minutes for 4 people. So about 8 minutes. And Kate, I know we had talked about more like 10 minutes. So I hope that doesn't encroach on your storytelling, but I also know that the last person to share probably only needs like 3 or 4 minutes. So 10 should be just about fine. So I will pass the mic to you as our first person to share. Thank you, Kate, for pitching this idea and asking the Hope Executive Committee to make time for it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, hi, my name's Cade. My pronouns are they, them. And originally I messaged Julie wanting to just talk a little bit, mostly about the recent experience I've had moving back into Corvallis, and just like how absolutely shocking it was in terms of the change. Even this happened in like 3 or 4 years in terms of like rental prices and also like just, I mean, I work for the county and it seems like almost everyone I work with, at the health department, like no one can even afford to live in Corvallis. Like the vast majority of people I work with do not live in Corvallis, Albany, Lebanon, like all that. But anyway, so that was kind of what spawned the idea. And just kind of like my main contribution to the Hope Board is my lived experience. So just kind of wanted to like talk a little bit about that. So just a little background on me. I have lived in Benton County for almost 10 years now. And I absolutely love it here. Like this place is my home. I grew up in Bremerton, Washington, which is home to 2 naval bases. It's much more of a kind of like conservative military culture. And in high school, I came out as LGBT, and like where I grew up, there's just no place for me there. And actually, to kind of like escape my hometown, I joined the Navy to just become, I mean, it was really like my only option to become financially independent. And that's actually how I ended up in Corvallis. I got a full ride ROTC scholarship and was placed at OSU, and I studied engineering for the first year in 2013. That's what brought me here. And Corvallis really was a place where I found community, like just found my people, and truly have really worked ever since to like contribute to this community. But anyway, my first experience was homelessness was in 2014. So I'm transgender. I transitioned to male, and at the time I was not in the military as a male when I came out. And also, this was prior to Obama repealing the ban on transgender troops. So essentially, I got kicked out of the Navy. I lost my scholarship, my housing, like I didn't have family support at the time. And so that's how I found myself housing insecure in Corvallis. And to me, that looks like couch surfing for a while until I could find a van. And I lived in that van for like 3 years. And there was not a single time during that time I was not working full time in Corvallis. I've worked, I mean, so many like classic Corvallis businesses. I worked at Gathering Together Farm for years, American Dream. If you've ever had a donut from the farmer's market, I probably made it. Like, but anyway, so basically I felt like I'm kind of I escaped that situation, like through the supportive community mostly. But I guess it now having kind of some perspective on things and seeing how not only so many people still struggling with homelessness, but now that I'm in this completely different realm of life, working full time, working for the county, like still like the people that I'm surrounded with still have such a burden on them in terms of being able to keep a roof over their head. And so for me, like I lived really in rural communities. I lived out in Monroe and Summit for the past 7 years, which is how I was able to afford housing, really. Rent was so much, and I was still like working, going to school in Corvallis. Little background too, I graduated from OSU public health last year. So thank you. But I guess, like I said, I've worked really hard to get to this point, going back to school. I work full time, you know, for the county now. And I was, you know, living out in Summit and, you know, commuting almost 40 minutes every day and, you know, been working for the county almost a year now. And I just got to the point, like I really need to live in town. And was at kind of the first point in my life where I could realistically think about, you know, getting my own place in town. And I mean, it was truly like a miracle. I was even able to find something. I found a duplex to live in, but I wanted to speak to just how difficult it is. Even like George brought up something earlier that I was just like agreed with 100% in terms of like so much, like so thankful that we're coordinating homelessness response, but kind of made me think too, like in public health, we learned about like primary prevention and like how can we really like at the root cause, like, I don't know, like address this. And to me, I'd also kind of rang back to our H.O.P.E meeting a few months ago where the folks from Eugene came and talked about kind of the efficacy of the housing program there in terms of like, you know, what was it, like 5% of people that are on that waste list actually end up getting housed. And I don't have the exact numbers for our housing program here in Benton County, but I can tell you, you know, the housing people are right across the hall from me here. And some of my peers that I work with, I work in behavioral health here, are in that program too. And it's very similar. There's a huge wait list and they do great work, but it comes down to there's just not enough places to house people. And I'm definitely like not coming in like I have all the answers, just more like sharing experience of like from kind of my perspective, I guess. It seems like creating more affordable housing is like such a huge priority. Like, again, I've been here for about a decade and have befriended folks that have grown up here in Corvallis too, like me, like lived and worked here their whole lives, even longer. And like I said, I got extremely lucky that I was even able to find a place within my budget. And like we were talking about earlier too, you know, if you pay over 30% of your income in rent, that's considered rent burden. And I'll pull it up at the end, but I, you know, found some statistics from I think like the 2017 housing report in Corvallis, and what was it, 37, this was years ago, I'm sure it's like much more severe now. It said 37% of Corvallis renters spend more than 50% of their income on rental. And this is old data. Like, I'm sure this is like so much more now. Because me personally, I'm paying about half of my income in rent as somebody that works for the county, you know, and that would make me severely rent burdened. So I don't know. I'm again not having any like solutions, just kind of like I think not only like I think just this whole system is so fundamentally flawed of how housing is dispersed. And I'm so grateful for like all of our support within each other and community to create like these lower barrier services. But I got not but and like I just really hope that we can envision a system that is like just more equitable. Because it makes me really sad, I guess, that I see so much of my community and people like me that we really want to contribute and we want to give like all of ourselves to this community. And I can, you know, it sounds like we're working so hard just to survive. And yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, but that's just my experience.
That was perfect, and I think that's that was the point of you wanting to share of, you know, people experience homelessness, who you work with, who are your neighbors, who you know from American Dream Pizza, who are on the Hope board and wanting to serve and work on this and have long-lasting, stable jobs to really destigmatize how folks think of homelessness and to humanize it because it could happen to so many of us. So thank you. I don't know if you're seeing in the chat just appreciation.
I don't know why, but I don't have the chat. Like, I don't know if
Oh.
because I'm online or whatever. I'm not
Well, let
like...
me read it to you from Peggy. Thank you for your courage and willingness to share your story with us. And from Anita, Cade, you are such an inspiration. So much love to you and thanks for dreaming of a better world with us. From Dr. Alma Torres, thank you, Cade, for sharing. Peggy Lynch, thank you, Cade, a story for all to hear. From Barbara, thank you. From Charles, thank you so much. So there's a lot of appreciation for you having the courage to talk about this tonight. I see that we have some questions from folks, but we also have a couple other board members who want to share their experiences. So I'm going to hold the questions until the end and make sure our other board members with experience are able to share their stories and see if we have time. So next, we're going to go to Bria. Bria, are you able to share at this point?
I am. Let me just readjust myself. Okay, yes, I am.
No, you're fine. You have about 8 minutes or so, if that works for you, to talk about your experiences.
That works. I'm going to try not to ramble. I apologize if I do. My name is Bria. I use she, her, and I have lived through, first of all, I am a 90s child. So I have seen some stuff growing up, and it kind of makes it hard to adjust to things when you can see like everything just kind of fall apart as you grow up. Where I was born into like a very like middle class family, and then as I grew up, it just, that distinction just went to, no, you're just low income now. My mom passed away in 2008, and I think that's when everything started because she was kind of our rock and our stability. So for a minute, we lived with our dad, and that entailed living with our grandmother. And I was in high school by then, so already things are looking great. So lived with our grandmother for a little bit. We finally found a place. And then I decided to move out on my own. to go to college. That didn't really work out because college is expensive. And so then I moved back in with my father, and then the house we were living in, he couldn't afford, so I moved out after my brother did. And at that point, I was working 2 jobs and trying to go to school at the same time. No, sleep did not exist. And it was to a point where I didn't know how to drive, so I was always taking public transportation. And I was born and raised in DC, so it's unlike Corvallis, it's very expensive to take the bus and the train to and from wherever you need to go. So that was eating into my paychecks. My rent was eating into my paychecks, and there were a lot of times where I had to choose between eating or having a roof over my head for the next month. And that was very hard, but there was also, for the longest time, this stigma of food stamps equals just lazy, because, government handouts. And for the longest time, that's what I thought, even though I was going through that point in my life. And then my brother moved in with me because he couldn't afford where he was living. And then we got an apartment together, and then we got evicted about 2 years after, because we were both working full time, but we could not make the rent. So that definitely opened my eyes, because I had never experienced eviction before. So that hurt, because it's like good 90% of my things like have forever been lost, including pictures I will never get back, including like stuff I've had since I was a baby I will never see again. So that really, took a toll on me. And for about, I want to say 3 weeks, my brother and I were moving from place to place, trying like couch surfing, trying to find a way to, find a home. Finally, some family members were like, hey, you can stay with me for a little bit. Obviously, that wasn't permanent housing. And then end of 2019, I had a friend here who said, hey, I have room. So I actually moved 3,000 miles. And I was illegally staying in their apartment because I wasn't on their lease. But it didn't help. But I was still, and didn't have home security, because now all of my paycheck was going into an apartment that I wasn't even, in charge of, which is very frustrating. And then I was finally able to move at the very beginning of April of 2020 to somewhere else, which was a lot stabler and a lot easier. And the Corvallis Consortium actually helped me out. So like I gotta shut you guys out for that, because that rental assistance definitely helped. And then last year I was able to move in the apartment I have now, which is a very nice place, but I'm still, even now, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and I'm making about 17 an hour. But I also work in Salem, because everything here in Corvallis doesn't pay as much as my current job. So it's like I have to pay out the wazoo just to get to work and back, on top of rent, on top of making sure, I have food, on top of making sure my cat is healthy, because I have an ESA, because my depression and my anxiety is like always constantly like at the very top. I do have medical services, but it's very hard to balance everything when the very forefront thought is, how am I going to make rent for the next month? Or it's like, am I going to have to move again? So that's my experience with home insecurity. I understand being on a wait list is very not fun, because when I was still in Maryland and when I was living with my aunt, my brother and I were constantly trying to find places to live that were in our budget, and the wait lists were from 1 to 10 years of affordable housing. And trying and just hearing someone call you back going, hey, we don't have anything unless you're able to wait 5 years when you need housing right now. So it was to a point where I was buying months worth of groceries at the Dollar Tree, trying to feed myself. It was hard and it was tough, and I think having that lived experience opened my eyes to when I see people here and it's like, it's not their fault. It's not them being lazy. It's not them not wanting the help. It's them trying to find the help and not being able to access those resources as quickly or as efficiently as they need. And after experiencing that firsthand, that's also why I wanted to join the Hope Board. It's like I experienced that firsthand. I understand how that feels, and I just kind of want to be able to be a part of the solution and figure out how to help people who are currently in that situation and who know what that feels like, and not wanting to have them be in that position ever again. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Bria, thank you so much. Folks are thanking you in the chat as well for your courage and sharing your truth. And for taking the time to be a part of this board, to make sure that other folks learn about our community members who have lived through this and how hard it is. So thank you very much. We have about 10 minutes left, and Ari and I think Catherine want to share. So Ari, if you can take about 5 to 6 minutes, would that be possible? Are you at a place where you can share?
Yes, I can try to keep it as concise as possible. I think when I reflected on this, thinking about speaking today, I came to the conclusion that my journey to houselessness started about 4 years prior, I think, to actually getting in that situation. My parents both died around the same time, within 16 days of each other. I was just turned 19, and I found myself in the situation where, as they were dying, I had a lot of responsibility in terms of end of life decisions, life support, and I was an only child, so I pretty much had to deal with this on my own. When I had to deal with the funerals, the burials, all that stuff. By the time I started drinking through all that, and by the time I got to the end of it, I started drinking more and more, started doing drugs, and I essentially went, had jobs on and off, but I was kind of going into a downward spiral. Tried to get some education, then my grandmother died, and that was pretty much it, I think, in terms of like being high functioning in terms of getting it together. So I came to a place about 4 years later where I didn't have a job. My relationship fell apart. I was on my own. I didn't know how I was going to afford where I was living. But someone reached out to me that knew my ex and said, hey, I'm in this program. Why don't you come to a meeting with me? And so he would drag me around to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and, just kind of talk to me. And I really had a clue what was going on. I didn't know which end was up or even about any kind of services that might be available. And wound up, getting a roommate. So I still had a roof over my head, but that roommate was supposed to be clean and sober and wound up being someone who was sober but doing drugs. So I wound up having an issue with that again, and then sending my rent check off and having it not get there. So that was kind of the last money I had. And so I told the landlord, hey, just use my last month's deposit. And I made a decision I had to get out of there no matter what, if I was going to stay clean and sober. So prior to that, this friend had, sold me on credit this really old car. It was completely rusted. It looked like an overripe banana, had a giant roof rack on its thing and on the roof, and it would overheat all the time. So I took my dog. I gave my cat to a friend, took my dog, and started living in that car. And I lost my job at that point. I had a job, and the roommate I had got me the job, and he told the boss I was an addict and alcoholic. And the boss fired me without cause. So, but again, people who were in the program were kind of dragging me around and said, here, go to unemployment, apply. Even if they deny you, then you're going to get a hearing and show up. And then another friend took me to the hearing. I was like, no idea what I was doing. Went to the hearing and they said, yes, you were fired without cause. We're going to give you unemployment benefits. So I knew I was going to get those. And I was in the car. I had tried couch surfing at a friend's, and her roommate wasn't there. And when he came back, he accused me of stealing, which I didn't do, because she said I could use some of his vitamin C because I was sick. And he said I stole it. So I was out of there, and this is just to talk to stigmatism, right? And stereotypes, like how people view you, even if you're not doing something. I used to get pulled over by the cops in that car all the time, even though I wasn't doing anything wrong. And I'm just saying this to make people aware, that sometimes people get in worse trouble when they're not doing anything at all. That's wrong. So I went to unemployment. I saw a flyer there about a job development program called Renaissance. And I was in San Francisco at the time. This was many, many years ago. And it was a job development program, and I had to get accepted to the program. I had to take a test. And because there was someone in the program who was a math tutor, she tutored me because I didn't think I was, I quit high school. I had a GED. I didn't think I could pass the test. So I did that, put the effort in, somehow passed that test, got into the program. And then they also gave me a job working as a clerk in a high-rise grocery store downtown. And so I would go to work 8 a.m. I'd work for 5 hours. I'd go to school for 5 hours. I'd go to meetings at night. And then I'd go out and hang out with friends who were clean and sober. And I was doing that. And then I was shown a flyer, a place where to look for kind of housing, like roommates and stuff, where they posted it up at a college. And I found one there, and they happened to be people who were in recovery, and I needed $300 deposit, and they would accept my dog, because my dog was my family. When my parents died, I had the dog. And so I was like, what am I going to do for this $300? And I had an aunt back east who was on Social Security. She didn't have a lot of money. I was like, she's going to tell me I'm crazy. She's probably not going to give it to me because of all my drug addiction and losing everything I had. And I called her and I said, look, this is what I'm doing, and this is the progress I'm making. And she gave it to me out of the little money she had. And that was the difference between me getting a roof over my head and not getting a roof over my head. And that's how close it was, $300. So, and like I said, at that time, I don't know if there was any services or not. I certainly wasn't hearing about them. And so did that. And within 6 months, I finished the course, and I was able to get a job. It was in electronics and mechanical engineering kind of course. I got a job as a field engineer. I had a company car. I had a gas card. I had a salary. And I was like, oh my God, and I'm saying this because I think if all those things hadn't come together, the value of that was like having a bunch of services in one place, having different people drag me around to different places who knew different things. And the value of having that kind of a navigation center where people, and having them be aware of it and letting them know these things exist. I think it's invaluable. I feel totally grateful and blessed all the time, you know, having a family. The value of education became apparent to me. I'm a very big advocate for making education affordable and available. I went on while I had kids and while I was married, continued my education and eventually got a master's degree. And I think all of this would not be possible. I don't think I would be here today if it wasn't for those folks who grabbed me by the kind of shirt collar and like mentored me one-to-one, and with kind of like no benefit to themselves at all, except they were trying to give back as well. They were individuals who were clean and sober, trying to give back for what they had. And so, yeah, that's why I'm here. I'm here because I want to give back as well. I try to, you know, do service wherever I can in any way I can, because I know personally it makes a big difference. You never know what difference you're going to make in someone's life, you know, be it, you know, taking them to a meeting or, you know, teaching them how to do math, showing them where a flyer is, you know, it can be just as basic as that. And so, you know, I'm really happy to be involved with the, you know, Hope Board and to help in whatever way I can, and to help other folks, and to also help destigmatize, like, even addicts and alcoholics. You know, they're there because they have an illness. They're there because they're sick. There's depression. There's all kinds of things people are experiencing that have nothing to do with who they are inside. So thanks for taking the time to have us share.
Yeah, Ari, thank you for so much truth and courage, and for sharing real childhood trauma. That's really powerful. I don't know if you can see the chat and see all the positive feedback and thanks that you are getting. We are going to go a few minutes over because I want to make sure Catherine is able to give the perspective that she wanted to share tonight. Catherine, how do you feel about talking about it for a few minutes?
We'll run with it. So thank you, everybody. I'll make this brief, just with respect for time. Many of you know me from the community, and having had the opportunity to serve on the Hope Advisory Board. But just a real quick perspective, lots of things that were shared tonight were just fantastic. And I really appreciate that our other fellow Hope members are willing to share those perspectives, because they're very hard to understand unless you've walked in those shoes. So it helps. I will just say that my family was not probably the typical path to homelessness. In 2008, the recession took our businesses, and they left us on the streets in a very short period of time. So we had a nice middle class income and profitable business, and it all just evaporated with the debt and everything else. It just literally found us on the streets. We, as a family, we had a 6-year-old daughter at the time. We have literally lived in the farm sheds and vehicles and the truck stops in this part of the country. We have lived homeless in Philomath. And yet at the same time, this is some time ago now. I just want to be that story of there's a path to success. And I think you've heard that, or to overcoming the challenges of homelessness. And I think you've heard some of that tonight with what's been shared, and certainly from some of the partners in the room. And that's the space that I really want to lean in, is that through our experience, you know, imagine toting your 6-year-old daughter around town trying to find a bathroom, or trying to find a meal, or a place that's safe to sleep where there are not predators in that area, or whatever those things look like. But it is the folks in this room, and or the roots of some of the organizations that exist in this space, that are the ones that really made the difference, because we couldn't go to our kitchen to get food. We had to go to a food bank. We had to go to another place in town to get clothes. We had to go to another place in town to get assistance or healthcare or emergency medical services, whatever it was. You had to literally go places to find those resources. And yet there were folks there at those doors saying, you know what, you're welcome here and we're going to help you. So we were supported greatly by our Community Services Consortium programs, our food bank programs, our stone soup and food programs. So lunch, breakfast, dinner, neighbor to neighbor in Philomath, Good Samaritan in their programs. Vina Moses carried a lot of like clothes. They rebuilt our house for us, right, from scratch. And those are really the folks that are the heroes in this space, right? We went from those spaces. We spent 9 months in a 12-foot 1969 vintage camper with a little girl with no bathrooms. And that's where we lived. And that is right here in your neighborhood. We won't talk about where. And yet, almost 10 years later now, it was just a year ago that we got off of the last of our assistance that helped us bridge those gaps. I have been able to return to school as a first-generation college student, and my daughter piggybacked the very next year, and she is able now to attend school. We never thought that would be possible. We are in a home now because people who stood in the gap for us, and it's a home that we are able to buy from those folks that stood in the gap for us, right? So there's that pathway that occurs. I now have a career level job, which had that kind of, business ownership before, but who knew you'd ever get to that space? And the health crisis in our family that we experienced has at least made it so that life is bearable because we have support and assistance and resources today. So I just want to nod again to Community Service Consortium, Love Inc., Community Outreach, all the folks I didn't mention. You're here in this room and you made the difference. You make the difference every day. If it were not for you, we would not be here. There was no options for us anywhere else. And we journeyed that path with you together. And that's the importance of this space today. So I didn't mention that I get to sit on it's a privilege to serve as a city councilor in Philomath. I get to help steer these conversations about how we make that difference in our rural communities. It's the heroes in the room right here, though. So I deeply want to extend my appreciation. You've made the difference for me, my husband, my daughter, and you have impacted, I cannot even imagine how many individuals besides us in our community because of the work you do, the hearts you have, and the doors you've opened. So thank you so very much. And thanks for the extra 5 minutes.
No, thank you, Catherine. I know it takes a lot of courage to share. And we talked about this on the phone of that fine line of destigmatizing this issue and providing a face and humanizing it. But that there is still stigma in the communities we live in. And how hard is that to live through and be part of the change? So I really commend all of your courage tonight, sharing your experiences and your paths. I know that folks need to go for dinner time or children or whatever other reason, but I also know we had a couple of questions from other board members. So if you can stay.
I need to leave for 6 o'clock meeting.
Okay,
so
Catherine.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for what you all do.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night.
Catherine. Cindy and George, you had questions. Cindy, go first. Go ahead. Oh, you have your hand raised, Cindy, from before. But did you have a question for any of our folks sharing tonight?
No, but I incredibly appreciate all the heartfelt, wonderful feelings that I got from just listening to people's stories. And I'm happy to have all of you as community members. It's an incredible group of people. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. I agree with you. George, I think you had a question too earlier, but I wanted to make sure folks could share first.
Yeah, thank you. You know what I have is a comment. And the comment is I want to comment to what Cindy said, is that the stories here are just really wonderful examples of what can happen when people choose to work together and really choose to make change. And I want to assure you, Cade and Arian, and I know Catherine knows this, that you're in the right place to be that agent of change. That's why you're here. And it's good that you understand that. And it should remind us about how important the work that we're doing is, because this is one of the places where real change can actually happen. We have the ability to influence the people that make decisions about things that affect people's lives like they affected yours. And so we need to take that seriously. It also, and we do. And it also points out something that we need to do, and I want to get this, Julie, on the agenda for the executive committee, is that we should really do an education component about the work that's already been done around about developing affordable housing in the community, because there's been a lot of work done, but it's always been catch-up work, and we're really focusing on trying to get ahead of it. We never been able to get ahead of it. But the discussion's really around, why has the market failed to provide housing for people that really are middle-class people that have jobs and can't compete, but one major crisis and they find themselves in the streets, and they find themselves without a place to live and then no support to be able to get that. So why has the market failed? And then looking at how do cities and counties play a role in creating those kind of housing opportunities, because they do, and both Benton County and Corvallis have, but what more can be done, and start kind of moving down, investigating that area about how we get, who's doing the work now, who's doing the development now, and what's happening, what's in the pipeline, and what are the options that are available to communities to be able to increase the stock, because we know that private developers aren't going to build it. But thank you for your stories. It's a real important reminder to say you can be the change. You can do the things that make a difference.
Thank you, George. One last question or comment, and then we can end the meeting. Go ahead, Charles.
There's the button. George kind of already said it. Really, I want to express my appreciation for these stories. I think they're so helpful for those such as myself who's had that question of where I'm going to sleep. Trying to figure out how to make ends meet and pay bills with low income and high costs, and you're not alone, although it feels like it at the time. So having these stories, sharing this, lived experiences, we're all in this together, and we're working together to make that change. And I think it's just, I don't know, it said something to me, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles. I really appreciated it too, and I hope everybody who shared tonight felt that appreciation for your experiences. It takes a lot of courage, and it's really inspiring to hear. Okay, thank you, Hope board members and everybody else who tuned in. We'll go ahead and conclude your August meeting, and we'll see you all in a month. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.